Hey everyone, welcome to Love with Francesca, where we deep dive into relationships, self-love, and the empowering journey to authentic connection and healing. Today, I have with me Alexa. Thank you for being here.
Oh, Francesca, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on.
I'm so excited to have you here. So we met at like the only networking event that I've been to in Toronto. And I was a little nervous to go. I was expecting like very small talk business, and then I started listening to your conversation. I was like, wait a minute, this is
I
someone
think we
that's
had
like right up my alley.
I think we had a mutual friend who said, "Oh, you two need to talk. You two need to
Yes,
come together. You have a
yes,
lot of overlap." And then you and
yes.
I just hit it off like a house on fire.
Yes. And in typical, I don't know if this is for you as well, but I'm not great at the whole small talk thing. So once I found you and people like you, I was like, perfect. I found my people.
We dove deep into sex, love, relationships, attachment theory. We just
Yeah,
we just ran with
we
it.
went for it. So other than meeting you, let me tell everyone why I also wanted to have you on. And there was so much alignment, like you said, of what we talked about. So Alexa's a trauma-informed sex, love, and relationship coach. Love it. Specializing in conscious dating and empowerment. So rooted in self-love and pleasure, she helps women and folks to date consciously, attract authentic partnerships, and live a fully turned on life.
Woo!
Desire-based coaching approach, Alexa will take you on an inner journey to uncover what your heart truly wants and what's in the way of that. Very important. Move through blocks and bring your desires to life with clarity and confidence in real world. She helps you to fully embody your worthiness and magnetic energy to prepare you for the love you seek by using holistic tools such as visualization, meditation, breath work, self-pleasure, and movement. She also draws from somatic practices and ancient wisdom and teachings.
Ooh,
Beautiful.
thank you for the
Beautiful.
intro.
I'm also, so we were chatting about this a little bit before, and if you've heard me say this on the podcast before, you've heard me talk about how I've been in a relationship for 12 years. I've never been, I mean, I was single for like 2 months in Miami, but that doesn't really count. But I've never been properly single as an adult. And so dating is not my expertise. I always tell my clients, listen, this is my opinion, but take it with a grain of salt because the dating world confuses me. Um, but that's why I'd love to have people like you on who are experts more and do know more about the dating world. And it sounds like we have such a similar way of looking at relationships, but just from two different angles of like the single versus the person that's already in the relationship. But like we were saying, it all comes down to self-love. So given that, can you please talk to us about what inspired you to become a conscious dating and relationship coach, and just like a little bit about that journey of how you became one?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it stems back to my early 20s. And maybe something I should start with is the difference between conscious dating and dating that's not conscious is intentionality. I think it's also very much a holistic approach. It brings in so much more than just how to show up on a date, what to say, what to do, following a script. It's really a journey that starts inside and then opens up outside. So it's really self-love. And I think in my early 20s, I didn't have much of that. I was struggling with my body, my sexuality. I didn't really know what pleasure was. I didn't really know how to ask for what I wanted. I also carried a lot of shame in my body. I didn't feel comfortable. I felt not really good in my own skin. I longed to have the sex lives of other people. I was like, I'm missing something. What's going on here? And then it was in my late 20s, I had what I call a character defining breakup, where it really forced me to grow up. I questioned everything. What do I want in relationship? What do I want as a woman? What do I want? What do I desire? And then if we fast forward, I'm giving you the truncated version here. I'm giving you like the
Yeah.
quick fast forward, speeding through it.
Yeah.
Um, in my early 30s, I found myself in a beautiful relationship, but it didn't quite have the intimacy, the connection, vulnerability that I was seeking. And that sort of set the tone for, okay, there's got to be something else. Like, what am I missing? What do I need to know? Why are my eyes closed here? And that fed into this deep dive into learning about relationships. Who am I in relationship? What is this neo tantra thing that people are throwing around? How can I dive deeper into my purpose? And so all of this came together uh, as I continued to learn and train. And it was all in the field of sex, love, relationships, coaching, drawing in things from Tantra, from Taoism, just it kind of, my life erupted. And this was around COVID time too. So I don't know if anybody else can relate, but this was a beautiful and very strange moment in time where I could choose to pour my energy and my time into bettering myself. I really had this opportunity where I wasn't weighed down by the day-to-day 9 to 5 work, because I didn't have that anymore, or my time just opened up completely. And this was an opportunity to look into myself.
Mm. That's really beautiful. I love meeting people that took like an adversity or something that was challenging for them, that took the time to understand themselves. And then once they were able to do that, are now like, here, let me share everything that I learned with you so that you also can develop the sex life or the intimacy or the connection or
Mm,
the relationship that you're like truly seeking and not sure how to do. I think that's really beautiful. I think it's I know a lot of people that could really benefit from the support, a lot of women that maybe were like, we've been similarly personally experienced a lot of shame in my body, experienced a lot of shame when it comes to sex, when it comes to self-pleasuring, when it comes to all those things.
mm,
And
mm.
um it's something that if when the shame latches on to your sexuality and it stays there, it really impacts your relationship
Mm,
immensely. And it not just with your partner, obviously, or partners, but with yourself especially, and it impacts everything.
mm,
So I think it's really beautiful if you're able to kind of do that transition to even like, first of all, become aware of it, right? Even like
mm,
acknowledge
absolutely.
that that's what's happening. And then to be able to do something about it and kind of transform it. So, okay, let me not
Yeah,
digress
thank
on
you for
my
that
own tangents
reflection.
here. Yeah,
Well, actually, I just want to jump in and say something
please do. Yeah, yeah.
that reminded me of, I got to a point where I couldn't blame any of my partners. I couldn't blame, I
Mm,
couldn't accuse, I couldn't be like, this is your fault, you did this. I really turned the lens on myself because I can only control my reactions. I'm the
mhm,
one that can control my next move. And that's when I thought, like, how can I love myself better? How can I learn to do better instead of blaming others? That was a really important mind shift for me, because I
mhm,
felt like I was performing sexually to a certain degree. I also felt
mhm,
like my pleasure was in somebody else's hands, quite
mhm,
literally.
mhm,
And I was giving my power away. I was
mhm,
completely giving my power away. I didn't feel magnetic. I didn't feel like I was in charge of my own life. So when I
mhm,
realized that maybe I'm part of the problem, not the problem completely, but that's a relationship, right? 1 plus 1 equals 3, in a good way and a not so pleasant way. But there's a responsibility. And how can I be 100% responsible for my 50% of that
mhm,
relationship?
mhm. What helped you recognize that you were part of the problem? What was the switch?
Well, it's a relationship. I mean, if
Yeah.
something's not working out well, it's not necessarily because it's just one person's problem. It's also my
Mhm,
reaction. I
mhm,
also don't think I was the best communicator. I think
mhm,
I learned to just hold back and let it wash away, let it just figure out itself. I didn't really speak up as much as I could have. I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't have the tools, I
mhm,
didn't have the self knowing. I was like, maybe it's not a big deal. It just, the
mhm,
shift happened when I realized that I'm responsible for myself.
mhm. It was
My
really
happiness.
powerful. Yeah, yeah, I totally like relate and agree with everything that you're saying. It was really
Yeah.
powerful a few years ago. I was listening to some sex therapist podcast, and she was like, your orgasm is your responsibility.
Ooh.
And I was like, oh, okay, we're going there.
Wow,
Um,
yeah.
and that was a really powerful thing because I think similar to, I think a lot of people, women, I don't know, but are like a bit more like passive in terms of just like, okay, like whatever you want to do,
Mm,
we can do. Whatever you don't want to do, we won't do. And then it's like, or like, just very unaware of like what even gets you to orgasm, what
mm,
makes you feel pleasure,
mm.
what turns you on, what is it that you like? And if you can't answer that question, it becomes really difficult for your partner to, or your partners to answer that question, because then they have to what somehow magically figure out what turns you on when you're not even fully aware of what turns you on. Like, how are they going to do a good job, you know?
100%, 100%. And I think that's why desires are so important and knowing how your body works. Full
Mm,
disclosure, I did not have an orgasm until I was in my later 20s. I thought there
mm,
was something wrong with me. I remember looking
mm,
up on Google and like, what does it mean to be asexual? What are some of the symptoms? I thought I was broken. I thought I was anorgasmic. I
mm,
just didn't know. And I thought that it was my partner's responsibility. I thought it was his job.
mhm,
When I dove deeper into this work, when I started unfolding what pleasure means to me, when I started taking orgasm off the table,
mhm,
I
mhm,
realized, wow, pleasure is created in my body. I can create it for myself. And when I
mhm.
am with a partner, we can just exponentially create it even more. But until
Yeah,
then, if I
yeah.
don't know how my body works, it's just going to be really difficult. And I was tired of living like that. I was like, no more. I want this juicy, sparkly connection to my body that I hear is possible. But
Hmm.
no, it's not for me. I'm broken. Like I had
God,
to
yeah.
put that aside and start to
Hmm.
think of the possibility that no, like it can be available to me.
I can only imagine how, I don't know, just like frustrating and disappointing and even devastating to a sense to be like, there must be something wrong with me. And to be in your late 20s, because I know in my late 20s, I know the conversations I was having with my friends. It was like, ooh, did you orgasm? Ooh, how did it happen? Ooh, da 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 da. And us women like share all the details of
Oh,
everything.
we do. We do.
And then it's like you're there. I can only imagine like you being in your head, maybe listening to friends talking about the multiple orgasms they've had, or like reading Cosmo, back in the day, that was my favorite, and being like, there, okay, this is what women can do. I'm not doing it. 1 + 1 = 2. Like clearly there's something wrong with me. Like it's just so sad that that's kind of like unfortunately the conclusion that you came to. And I think a lot of people come to because they don't know to even start looking into all of this because it's so like
Mm.
deprioritized in a sense. Or yeah, I think that's kind of what it is.
And it really shone a light for me that intimacy and a healthy sexuality with my partner is a value I have of mine, a value I have in partnership. That
Hmm.
came a little bit later. Once I discovered my body a little bit more, I was able to speak my
Yeah.
desires, know what I want. But to have that, one of the top priorities for me, that may not be for everybody,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
my journey led me to believe that this is something, this is the glue for me. I had to like dig myself up out of it. But
Hmm.
if I didn't go through that journey, I wouldn't realize how critical it is for me in partnership.
Mm. That's really beautiful. And even for
Mm.
yourself to be like,
Oh
I love
yes.
myself. Like, I pleasure myself. I love myself. Like that's just another form of really appreciating your time. It's kind of like if I heard another quote once that really just stuck with me. It was like, if you don't want to have sex with yourself, who's going to want to have sex with you?
Oh,
And I was like, okay, shots fired. But it
shots
makes
fired.
sense, right? Like,
So,
how am I and yeah, like how am I gonna ask someone to like, you know what it is too, because I find it's not even asking. It's like we tend to go into relationships expecting automatically. Nothing has been communicated. Millions of assumptions have been made,
mm,
expecting automatically that this person is going to satisfy me sexually. And then when they don't, I'm
mm,
mad at them. I'm pointing the finger at them. And I'm like, oh, clearly they're the problem. And I think what's
mm,
really beautiful about what you said earlier, which is why I kind of wanted to like stop on it for a second, is that when you had that switch of like, no, wait, I have responsibility in this, aka I have control in this. I don't just have to be like a passive participant in my sexual life, in my relationship life. It gives you so much agency to then be like, wait, okay, maybe this person doesn't know exactly what I want, but guess what? If they're open to learning, I'm happy to teach them. And then we can have like the most amazing, like explosive, expansive, creative. I'm sure we can get into the creativity of this all. You drop some words that I'm like, I don't even know if I know what that means. We'll have to dig into that. But
Happy to do that. Happy to do that.
before we go into too many details, I'm curious and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this appropriately, but like, can you talk to us about like, okay, we're here chatting about sex and pleasuring yourself and loving yourself, but it's like when we think about people's lives and we think about like what is the for, like, you know, sex for dummies kind of like what is like the value and importance that like a healthy sex life brings to whether it's like your day or your life or you know, does that make sense kind of?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I love to use the word pleasure practice instead of masturbation or jerking off or touching yourself. I think it adds in this element of ritual, of sacredness. You can even call it mindful masturbation too,
Mhm.
because you're adding in a little bit of intentionality to it. I think also a pleasure practice is a deep dive into exploring pleasure. So whether orgasm happens or not, it's merely about how does pleasure feel in my body? What feels good in my body? It
Mhm.
can be as simple, it can be a 2-minute practice of being in the shower and experiencing hot water on you. I love this example. This is an Esther Perel example, but I'm
Mhm.
also somebody who turns the dial up all the way to the hottest because I just love how the heat feels on my skin. I love the redness. I love how sometimes I get heat chills. This is a phenomenon that happens in the sauna. If you've ever been in a sauna and you kind of feel heat rippling through you, it's a chill, but you're actually hot. I digress, but all this to say that a pleasure practice can be as simple as 2 minutes in the shower, or it can be a little bit lengthier. You could have an hour-long practice where orgasm is on the table. You have chocolate, you have strawberries. It can be elaborate or it can be simple. I also think that with pleasure, it's taking a minute to slow down. So incorporating pleasure practices with sitting down to enjoy your coffee. I know that coffee can be very utility for me sometimes. I am a caffeine addict. I've tried to quit coffee. I did it for 9 months, but I have a love affair with coffee and I've come back to coffee and I rely on it. And I've had moments where I just throw it back because I need the caffeine.
Yeah.
But going back to trying to lessen my caffeine intake, I noticed that if I make a ritual out of it, I take some time making it. I sit down, I sip it slowly. I enjoy the flavor. I enjoy the way it smells. I can feel the caffeine opening up my body. I don't need to
Mhm.
drink it as much. It becomes a pleasure practice and just enjoying the coffee.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So pleasure can be so much more, but really it's about exploring the five senses. And then when we add sex to that, that's where it becomes intentional. That's where we open up ritual. That's where we can really dive deep and it becomes an act of devotion.
And that's like all the really beautiful ways in which you make your life. I don't know. I always my partner makes fun of me a little bit because he's like, you're just so happy with like the smallest little things in life,
Mm,
like you know.
mm,
But I'm like, that's what gets me excited because
mm,
creating a small little ritual I have control over. Waiting until someone gets married or a baby is born or these like big giant things, like that happens very infrequently, you know? In my life, it's going to happen infrequently. So I love that. Like if I can just create like 10 minutes in the morning. So I'm Italian. And so just to add that in there. And so I love going back home because when I go back home, there's in Italy, things are a little bit slower, especially if you
mm,
go to the south of Italy, things are much slower. I had to get used to that. I come from the north. I come from a city like Milan, which is like Toronto, like the rat race sort of thing. But if you do slow down, you're there, you're relaxed, you prepare the maca, you prepare the
Mm.
ground coffee in the maca, and then you let it, and then you hear it rise, and you let it, and you're like, oh, you hear the bubbling, and you get excited, and then you start to smell the coffee, and it like just like the aroma of it like enters the room, and then it's like you just had a beautiful conversation at lunch, so now you're just like chit-chatting post lunch at the table, and now you're just waiting for the coffee, and then you like slowly sip your coffee, and it's just like a whole experience. Whereas like in the US or in Canada, in Toronto, it's like an espresso machine, put in the thing, put the thing, put the thing, drink the thing. Like it's super like fast and like angsty. And you're right, like I'm thinking of it culturally at this point, but like if you live in cities like I know you also live in Toronto, but you're in Mexico right now, like if you live in cities like these, like if you're not creating your own opportunity for those little moments of pleasure, like with a lot of intention, put sex aside for a second, but pleasure, your day is just like a fucking giant to-do list at the end of the
Mm.
day. And like
Mm.
what kind of life is that to have a giant to-do list, you know? And there's no moments for just like really feeling alive and present in your day and getting excited over that.
And present in your body. I think
Yeah.
when you took me on that Italian mocha drinking, I felt it. I could taste it. I could
Yeah.
smell it. I could see it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that sensuality, we
Mm,
can make anything sensual. Even,
mm.
you know, even a first date can be sensual. When we
Okay.
start to think about how our body feels,
Yeah.
when we start to tune into our breath, our action, meaning like, how's our posture? Am I expanded? Am I contracted? What sensations are coming up for me in this moment? What emotions am I feeling? What thoughts am I feeling? And that is such critical feedback. That's data in the
Mhm.
moment of like, do I want to be on this date? Am I liking this person? How do I feel when I'm with this person? And I'm just using
Mm.
dating because I know first
Yeah.
dates can have a lot of pressure or feel a little bit
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But when we can start to tune into the five senses or tune into our body, that's how we stay a little bit more calm, a little bit more centered, a little bit more grounded.
Mhm.
It's what keeps us in the here and now. It's what keeps us present.
Mm, mm. I love that you brought up dating. Let's move into the dating space, why don't we?
Mm,
Because that's a
sure.
space, like I said, I don't know much about, and it scares me. And sometimes I tell my partner, I'm like, we might need to stay together forever because the idea of going on a first date terrifies me.
Well, you know me now, so you're
But now I
set.
know you, so I'll be like, Alexa, help me out. I need to go on a
Call me
first
up.
date.
Hey, this is what's happening. No, no, no. I wish lifelong happiness and bliss for
Lifelong
you and your
happiness.
partner. Yeah.
But so talk to us about conscious dating. What are like the main things that you recommend people? And yeah, I guess just even from this perspective of what you were saying now, like what I'm hearing is a lot of like listen to your body, focus on your body, and learn to like trust your gut and your intuition as you're
Mm,
in the presence of that other person that you're getting to know and like
yeah.
letting that guide you through the process.
Yeah, that's definitely one aspect of it. I
Mhm.
think another thing I'd like to add is the consciousness around yourself, your history, your story, your own wounding, your own trauma, and also your own amazingness. Like, what is so good
Mm.
about you? What do you bring to the table? I think specifically with women, we can forget what we bring to the table. We can be so focused on looking at the partner or looking at sorry, not the partner, but the potentiality in somebody. And we can get
Mhm.
attached really quickly. Like, oh, he's so good on paper. They've got this going on. This person has this person has that. And then we forget that we're kind of awesome too. We're amazing as
Mm.
well. And I think it's the consciousness around your own magnetism, your own beauty, your own fabulousness, if you will.
Mhm.
And so we get more of that when we do the inside work. So knowing some of the pain points, knowing that we all come into a connection with some baggage. We come
Mhm.
in with a story from our family of origin. We come
Mhm.
in with connections from our caretakers, from mother, our father. We come in with our own inner child. We come in with a heart that may be a
Mhm.
little bit bruised, maybe a little bit broken.
Mhm.
It's about shining a light on these things so that you can clear the path towards being with somebody, towards the love that you truly desire, instead of just showing up and being like, I'm going to figure it out. Yes, there's a part, there is spontaneity, and there's also taking responsibility for yourself before stepping into an energetic bond with somebody else.
That makes a lot of sense. I really love how you talked about not just what do I bring in the positive, but also like what is the baggage that I bring and how do I take responsibility for that? So,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I'm also curious about is like, okay, say I'm dating, I'm aware of quote unquote the baggage that I bring. I'm working on it, let's say. I'm, working on myself, working to accept what I bring to the table. When is the appropriate time to start sharing pieces of that baggage with someone? Like, what does that look like? And how do I know if they're a safe person to keep sharing?
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's necessarily a hard and fast rule.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you that it's the first date or the second date. I think
Yeah.
it's really trusting your ability to be discerning. I know that I've been on dates, first or second dates, where it felt very alive to share certain things. It felt like there was a connection, there was a flow. And then there have been certain relationships or dates where it just didn't feel aligned. I didn't feel like I could share certain parts of myself, and it becomes a filter. I think you really feel into what this person is capable of holding, and you also can't make assumptions. So you will have to test the waters a little bit. You might have to do something or say something. It doesn't land great. It's a bit of an explosion. There's a bit of a rupture, and you course correct. It becomes a moment of, okay, that really showed me something. So I'm going to continue or I'm going to stop.
Wow. The whole everything that I'm hearing below everything that you're saying of like in terms of like strategy of how to or guiding of how to do these things is a lot of intuition, following your intuition and trusting yourself. Like
Hmm.
even and like develop I was chatting with my friends last night about this, specifically about, how do you figure that out? And one of the things that we kind of settled on is that like especially in the dating world, like you need to develop like an inner thermometer to kind of
Hmm.
guide yourself of like, is this a red, is this a yellow, is this a green sort of thing.
Yes, I love that for
But that
sure.
comes with a lot of like, yeah, just like being connected with your body. And so I think I'm listening to you and I'm trying to put the pieces together because obviously I'm learning alongside who's listening to us today. And a lot of what I think I'm learning, and tell me if I'm correct, is like it's all interconnected in the sense that the dating is interconnected with the moments of pleasure, with the moments of self-pleasure, with the moments of getting to know yourself and getting to know your body and working
Mm.
through all the emotional internal stuff. Because in order for you to listen to your body, you have to be connected to it.
Mm.
And in order to date, you need to, I mean, you don't have to be, but recommended if you're conscious dating, right? You do need to be
Recommended. Yeah.
recommended.
Yeah. Highly recommended. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Highly recommended. If you are conscious, if you are dating and you want to, whatever type of relationship you want to create, you do need to listen to yourself and know what's happening in the moment. And in order to listen to yourself, you have to work through all the emotional stuff that's coming up, the
Mm.
thoughts, the fears, the beliefs, the projections, the assumptions, like all the things that you were talking about. Does that does that make sense for you?
So something that
Or,
came up for me while you were
yeah,
speaking about that
yeah.
is that you actually, and we, because you said recommended, you don't need to be in love with yourself to date. You don't need to be in love with
Mm,
yourself to have a partnership, but it's
mhm.
really highly recommended that you do,
I love that.
because you'll be able to know
Yeah.
what you want, how you operate in that partnership or in the container where you're dating. And that means you also have your back. It's like you're
Hmm.
using all parts of you to be your team. Even the
Hmm.
parts of you that might be scared, even the parts of you that might be fearful, all of these parts work with you to help point
Hmm.
out some of the green flags, to help point out some of
Hmm.
the red flags in the other
Hmm.
person and in yourself. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to
Yeah.
manage.
Yeah.
And I think it's so critical to come from that place of self-love, because when you do, you're able to, I feel like I may have just lost my train of thought there.
We'll get back to it, but I'll give you a
Okay.
chance. I'll give you a chance to remember, but we'll
Yeah.
definitely get back to it. I think I really like though what you said so far. I think it makes a lot of sense. Because so a friend of mine who's single sent me this reel that I was like, this is so overwhelming. She's like, 10 different types of professionals, 10 different types of people in your life, friends, family, whatever it is, giving you advice on dating. And I think
Mhm.
there's
I
so
saw that one.
much
The
that you
coach, the
saw that one?
therapist, the
Yeah.
shadow worker, the
Yeah.
podcast, the book. It was a great
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
It was a great one, right? And so I
Yeah.
was thinking, I'm like, gosh, like it just seems so overwhelming to date nowadays. There's just so many rules and regulations and advice and how to do it and how not to do it. But what I love about what you're saying is like, yes, sure, follow dating advice. Obviously, there's experts and it makes sense, but it's like, don't listen to them more than you're listening to yourself
Mm, mm.
and use yourself as a guide.
Yeah, I think it's important to take advice with a grain of salt. I
Hmm.
love Matthew Hussey, Esther Perel. These people know a lot.
Yeah.
And there's no one solution for everybody.
Yeah.
And even when you have your own struggles, I think there's a lot of value to the quote, trust your struggle, and
Mm.
diving deeper into that, pulling apart the layers. Because when you are able to dive deeper into yourself and discover a wound, discover a past trauma, when you can open that up even more, it's going to give
Mhm.
you information. It's all
Yeah.
information
Hmm.
that will help lead you towards more integration, towards healing. And so
Hmm.
while you're coming from a place of self-love, looking for a partner, you're working on your relationship to yourself, which ultimately primes you to be in relationship with somebody else. So it's
Hmm.
win-win. You can't go wrong. The most
Yeah.
important relationship you'll ever have is with
Hmm.
yourself. And when you can create love for yourself, when you can start to, I'm going to use the example of treating yourself like your own best lover or your own best friend, that sets the tone to not
Hmm.
only create more self-love, but to attract, to level up a bit more and attract a partner who's on your vibe.
Hmm. I think that's really important to be able to do. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because you can say you want something, but like if you're not treating yourself at that standard, you're probably going to attract how you're currently treating yourself.
100%, 100%. That's what I think being magnetic is about. It's nothing fancy and shiny. It's really just being okay with who you are on the inside, which
Hmm.
then affects your thoughts, your feelings, affects your actions, affects your results. And that's
Hmm.
how it spills out and creates more of what you want.
Mm. So beautiful. Okay, let me ask you a few last quick questions,
Mhm.
semi-rapid fire. So
Okay.
as best as you can, no pressure. What does loving yourself mean to you?
Mm. Accepting yourself, even the gnarly bits, the unpleasant bits, the little shadows, the not so pretty bits, but shining a light and and beginning to love them.
Mm. Beautiful. What's something you're working on right now?
Do you mean personally, professionally?
Personally, I should specify that. Personally.
Personally.
Yeah.
Ooh, so this year was the year of devotion for me. I choose a word every year, and I'm finishing up devotion, what it means to be devoted and disciplined to my work, my life, my goals. And now I'm moving into 2025, and the word for 2025 is magnetism. So I'm going to be transitioning over into that and feeling more aliveness in myself, because I talk about it, I live it, but it's always a work in progress.
Mhm.
I'm human too. There are moments where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm noticing that I'm a little bit off track. How can I get
Yeah.
back on? How can I
Yeah.
shorten the gap between noticing when I'm off track
Mhm.
and then completely falling off track? I think it's about shortening the gap.
Mhm. Totally. Who or what inspires you the most in your journey?
I think who I was 7 years ago inspires
Mm,
me. I
mhm,
always think of my past self. What would I tell her? What would she like to know? I
mhm.
actually wrote a letter to my future self about a year ago to open in 5 years. And I'm already curious about what I wrote. I think it's something I want to start doing all the time.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. And last one, what's your go-to self-care ritual?
Self pleasure.
Love it. Love it.
For sure. Not gonna lie, that's the one.
Love
And
it.
yoga. I
Yeah.
really enjoy body-based self-care rituals where I'm even just tuning into what's happening for a moment, even when I'm busy, just stopping, taking a dance break, meditating, a little bit of breath work. But I would say my two go-tos are yoga and self-pleasure.
Mhm. So thank you. Speaking of conscious dating and magnetism, I know you are going to be releasing something very soon. Do you want to share that with us?
Yes, very exciting. Early 2025, my business partner, Sherry, and I, we're going to be launching a program that's near and dear to our hearts. It's called Dating with Desire, and it's for single, busy, professional women and folks who are tired of dead end dating. We want to introduce a new way. We want to talk about desire. And so we actually have a freebie right now, a free gift. It's called the Desire Map to Dating. You can get it at datingwithdesire.com and learn more about the program in February on that website, datingwithdesire.com.
Amazing. Thank you. And I'll put that all in the show notes so people can easily link to it. Where can people find you?
So my website is called notanicegirl.com. And I want to talk about that actually just for a minute, because
Yeah.
throughout my journey, throughout how I've come to be here today, I always had this sort of not good enough feeling, or this people pleasing, or just trying to find my way.
Mhm.
And I realized that I actually had a partner once. He called me, he said, it was a lover, and he said, "You're such a nice girl, Alexa." And I took it to heart. It landed not really great. And I thought, I'm not a nice girl. I'm actually an authentic woman. I am myself. So that has actually become my brand. And the opposite of nice girl isn't bitch. It's not mean girl. It's
Mhm.
merely authentic woman, and being able to advocate for your desires, your pleasure, communicate, say what you want. And so that's really it. That's how it came to be. So my
Mhm.
website is notaniceGirl.com. I have a blog there. I have a free gift, a one-on-one consultation. I've got a couple of other things on my Instagram account too, Alexa Lynn Coaching,
Mhm.
Lynn, and I've got a couple more freebies there and lots of
Mhm.
fun tips and advice and videos coming pretty frequently these days.
Mhm. Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. I loved also the not so nice girl. Yeah, deeply recovering people pleaser, deeply relate to that. So
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. This lived up to all my expectations of chatting with you and being able to pick your brain about all this stuff. So thank you for sharing your time with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Francesca. It's a pleasure, and I had a lot of fun, and maybe we can do it again in the future.
Definitely, there's a lot more to unpack here.
So much more. We got excited about a couple of things.
Yeah. Um, for those of you listening, thank you so much for being here. You can tune in weekly on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. I will see you next week.